Hi guys, back. I know. Okay, listen, gosh, don't get on my case, okay? Welcome to another true crime story time where I tell you one true crime case that was solved using forensic science, all while doing, that's right, my makeup. Today's video will be featuring the Revolution Grinch I wanted to say collection, but it's not the full collection, the palette and the eyeliner. All the other products I'm using in this video will be linked in the description below. Quick reminder, the comment section is a privilege. Don't fuck it up. Now let's get into today's case. Look at this. Detective Inspector Lucy is coming up right now. Come on, babes. Here, get on the desk. I have a desk here now, so it's really hard for her to sit on my lap, and she barely climbs up on the desk. This story all takes place in 1994 in Lafayette, Louisiana, where registered nurse Janice Tran lived. Now, Janice, she was a mother of three who had been recently divorced. We'll get a little bit into why she got divorced here in a minute, because Janice is a little messy, but it's okay. I mean, we all have our messy times. One day in August of 1994, Janice began to experience a really bad pain in her eyes. And, you know, she couldn't shake this pain. I mean, every day she was waking up and she was having this pain. She literally could not focus. She was having headaches. It was the most terrible pain she said that she had ever experienced. And of course, it's in your eyeball. Like, I can't even imagine, because like I'm very sensitive about my eyes, and like if anything comes in or around my eyes, I can't. My mind is so nasty, like I need to stop. I cannot. The point is, guys, very protective of my eyes, so I can only imagine like if her eyes were feeling that way. Like she was having some really bad pain in her ocular region. What is wrong with me today? Are we gonna be able to get through this video without me being a nut? Probably not. She wasn't going away, so she decided that it was time for her to go to the doctor. So the doctor ran tests, and initially they dismissed it as just some sort of sinus. They just chalked it all up to it being sinus pressure, and that is the reason why, you know, her head was hurting and she was having such a bad pain, but they thought it had to do with her sinuses and not so much with her ocular nerves or anything like that. This is why I go to Google. Okay, I'm just kidding. Guys, do not Google search and self-diagnose, please. But I mean, sometimes doctors be getting it wrong. There's things that I've gone to the doctors for and they've told me it's this, is this, is that, and I've been there like 3 times and it ends up being 3 different things. Like, they're just wrong. Despite Janice going to multiple different doctors and seeking help for this pain, she didn't get any answers. It wasn't until Janice's visit with her gynecologist that she learned what was really going on with her. She found out that she had swollen lymph nodes. Her gynecologist was a little concerned about these swollen lymph nodes, so they sent her to have some tests performed just to make sure that she didn't have any sort of harmful viruses or anything like that, like any sexual viruses or what, you know, who knows what people do these days. Like, wow, my ear is ringing like a motherfucker right now. Oops. I'm trying not to curse, by the way, you guys. Like, I'm really gonna try. But okay, anyway. Universe coming through with something. Universe said, I got an answer for you, baby. And I said, okay, shoot. But can you please not radiate the side of my whole left side of my head with the answer? Can you just like send me a note? I don't know. So a couple of days later, the results come back from Janice's test. And she finds out that, guess what, you guys? She finds out that she is actually pregnant. And so this was a huge shock for her. She really didn't expect that, although I don't know how you couldn't expect it. You knew what you were doing, so. But it was just really unexpected. She was not expecting to hear that she was pregnant, you guys, but she was. In addition to her being pregnant, She also tested positive for HIV. Now, Janice was trying to figure out how she could have contracted HIV, you know, and the doctors were trying to help her. I mean, of course, there's a multiple different ways that she could have contracted the virus. It could have been from her having multiple different partners who weren't clean. She also could have contracted the disease from patients that she was treating at work, because remember, she was a registered nurse, so she did have these sort of patients that she was treating. So Janice, she really wasn't sure how she got it. She wasn't sure if it was from like previous partners or, you know, new partners, or if it was from patients that she had been working with. So she was trying to figure it out. So she went back to all of the people that she had, you know, had sexual contact with, had been sexually active with, and she encouraged them to also get tested as well. Now, child. Due to Janice's diagnosis, she had to make the difficult decision to terminate her pregnancy. Now, every person that Janice had been intimate with for the last decade was tested for HIV, and the results came back, none of them had it. So now Janice is really concerned. She's really confused, just like me right now, because I don't know what I did with my foundation. How in the world did she contract the virus if none of her partners had it? So she was thinking it had to be somebody at the hospital, a patient of hers, or that she treated that had this virus. I mean, it is rather bizarre, but Janice, she did have a lot of partners. Now, although Janice didn't really know how she contracted the virus, she did start to develop a theory. Now, Janice really didn't want to believe the theory that she came up with herself, but it was realistically the only way that it probably happened, and it just made a lot of sense to her. After Janice visited her primary physician, Dr. Schmidt, he suggested that Janice most likely contracted HIVs from one of her partners. In fact, this man had the audacity to say to her, "You probably got it from one of the people you sleep around with in those bars." I mean, what's going on there, huh? Why do you feel like you can talk to me like that? I mean, obviously, Dr. Schmidt got a chip on his shoulder about the whole situation, and we're about to find out why. Dr. Schmidt pretty much implied that Janice was a hoe. That is when Janice realized that her theory was most likely true. Now, here's the kicker, you guys. Janice and Dr. Schmidt were actually lovers. They had met years ago and had been carrying on an affair for quite some time. And so this is the reason why Dr. Schmidt was coming at her out of pocket like that, because he was probably jealous or upset and angry because she was carrying on sexual relationships with other people as well. Dr. Schmidt was really in his feels, and he was coming at Janice crazy. Now, Dr. Schmidt, he was a very well-respected doctor in Lafayette, and everybody knew him and they loved him. He was one of the best doctors. During their relationship, Janice and Dr. Schmidt had at some point decided that they were going to divorce their significant others and that they would come together. At least that's what Dr. Schmidt was telling Janice. These people had full-blown families, like whole families, you guys. Janice had her husband, Richard had his wife, they both had kids. They were just about to ruin the whole damn thing. Like, they really didn't care. They were just about to do what they wanted to do. Listen, I'm all in for love, but a lot of the times it's not really love. It's just attraction, fatal attraction, sex, stuff like that. People, it's not love. So like I said, if it's real love and you really feel like you should be with that person, that's one thing, but a lot of the times it's not. It really isn't. Sorry. And if it is, you're gonna do things the right way. You're not gonna do it undercover like that. That's my beliefs. I don't know though. People do whatever they want. Now, he and Janet, they met at a hospital many years ago. and they were working together initially, and that is how this whole affair started. Janice, she kept her promise. She broke things off with her husband and they got a divorce, and she left her entire family behind to go and start a new life with Richard. I mean, I'm talking her 3 children and her husband. While Janice is over here leaving her husband, getting a divorce, leaving her entire family, her 3 kids behind to go and start a new life with Richard, Richard is over here not doing nothing. Richard decides that he's actually not going to break things off with his wife. He is going to stay with her, and he's not going to ruin his family for, you know, some other woman, which makes a lot of sense. Like I said, it probably isn't love. It's just most likely lust or attraction or something like that. Boredom sometimes, most of the times, if people are bored, they start, you know, doing stuff. Basically, Richard never kept his promise to Janice. He never broke things off with his wife. He kept his family together, and they continued their affair. Girl, are you kidding me? Did you just leave your entire family for this man and he still don't break things off with his family or his wife? Can't you see that you've invested so much and he's not investing anything? And you're going to continue to have an affair with this man? I just don't get it. Because at that point, I would have been like, bye, boy. Bye. And I'm seriously, I would have went back to my husband. I would have been like, listen, I made a huge mistake. Honey, please forgive me. I'm never going to do that shit again. I learned my lesson. I want my family back. Like, whatever I had to do. But to continue the relationship with this man after everything he did and after everything he's showing you, you don't have your husband anymore. You don't have your kids. Forget about the husband. You don't have your kids anymore. So Janice is continuing to see Richard. And then in 1992, Janice gets pregnant with Richard's baby. Now his wife most likely knows about the affair. Although Richard did take care of the son he had with Janice, he wasn't really in Janice's life like that. He still remained with his wife and his family. He was not about to break up with the woman that he loved. I mean, at this point, you know, you have this man's child and he's still not breaking things off. So, I mean, it's time to stop. He's not gonna do it. I guess Janice also stuck around for her son as well, because I know that it's different when the person is the father of your child. A lot of women want to just keep that, you know, the family together, so they won't. But what about the family you ruined with your ex-husband? What about your 2 other children? I'm just wondering, what about that? At some point, Janice did realize a couple of times actually that this wasn't the relationship that she wanted, that she actually wanted to move on. And that is the reason why she started dating other people and having multiple partners and sleeping around and stuff. If you ask me, girl, you should just slow it all the way down. Focus on your child and yourself, because it's too much, girl. It's like you playing double dutch with your life with all of these partners and stuff. You don't know who's in the rope, who's out the rope. Like, girl, slow it down at that point. Focus on your child, focus on yourself, something like that, until you find a real partner and who's actually available to have that sort of relationship with you. She was tired of waiting on Richard to leave his wife. He was never going to do it, and so she decided that she was going to start dating around. She didn't care. This really infuriated Richard, because although he was married, he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. There was a few times when Janice did try to end the relationships with him, because she just felt like, this isn't going anywhere. You're not going to leave your wife. I want to end this. I want to move on. And Richard would not let her. He was adamant about controlling her. He didn't want her to be with anybody else, and he would not let her leave the relationship. I don't know how somebody not letting you leave, because honestly, I would have packed my bags up and I would have left, for real. I would have stopped working at that hospital with him. He wouldn't have been able to see me or have any contact with me at all. I would have cut off all access to me. Seriously. You know, sometimes you just have to cut off access, and when you cut off access, they can't get the access to you. and then they're willing to make moves. Richard was gung-ho about having his way. Richard threatened Janice several times about leaking photos of her, like, sexually explicit photos, if she ended the relationship with him. This, for me, sounds like a case of like power. This is clearly somebody who is just in it for power and control and literally just wanted her. He threatened to post these photos on their hospital bulletin board. Nowadays, people post stuff like that on the internet, but basically he was gonna post like actual photos onto the hospital bulletin board for all of their co-workers to see. On a separate occasion, he threatened to call the dean at Janice's nursing school and tell him that she had plagiarized her papers. I mean, he was that controlling and that mad about her, like seriously. And I mean, this is coming from someone who is a very well respected doctor, and they are telling a dean of a school that you plagiarized your papers. I mean, I don't know what can happen because I'm not a nurse. Possibly, maybe your nursing license can get taken away for that. When Janice would go out on dates with other men, Richard would intervene. In fact, one time he drove over to the home where someone that Janice was seeing, and he threatened to kill the guy. I mean, he was out of control. He's out of control. That's why, you gotta be careful who you let up in your pocketbook. My grandma used to call it the pocketbook. I call it the VIP section, okay? You just gotta be careful who you letting up in there. Like, seriously. Because people be getting pussy power. That's all I can say. This man literally drove over to another dude's house and threatened to kill him. I mean, that is the power of the vagina. Okay, that's the power of the vagina. So ladies, if you think you don't have power, you absolutely do, but use it wisely. So Richard was so out of his mind about Janice being with anyone else but him that he actually told Janice, I will fix you so no man will want you. This is what sparked the idea in Janice's head, or her theory, that Dr. Richard Schmidt, her lover, was actually the one who had given her the virus. Now she just needed to find out how. It wasn't long after this whole incident occurred where he threatened her that Janice ended the relationship with her and Dr. Schmidt, and she also stopped using him as a personal physician. Smart girl, smart. I mean, I would have done that a long time ago. She just backed way up off of him because he was acting like a nutbag. During their relationship, Dr. Schmidt would treat Janice for fatigue, and he would give her vitamin B12 shots. And this is where Janice got her idea that quite possibly Dr. Schmidt was the culprit, and maybe he injected her with HIV. She couldn't prove it, but she definitely thought that this was the case. Janice recalled that on August 4th, 1994, that Richard had called her up and told her that he was coming over to give her her shot. He arrived within minutes. I mean, homeboy must have been sitting right outside her door because he arrived like fast, girl. Janice was very reluctant, and despite her telling him that she did not want the shot and she didn't need it, it did not stop Richard from giving her the shot anyway. Now, Janice describes the shot as being something that she never experienced before. It was very painful and intense, and that Dr. Schmidt acted really awkward afterwards, and he kind of left immediately, like homeboy wasn't sticking around because he knew what he had done. After her HIV diagnosis, Janice became convinced that Dr. Schmidt had in fact injected her with the virus, and she went to the police. Now it's time to go into the palette. Ooh. But anyway, back to the story. Now, when Janet went to the police, initially investigators thought that Janice was most likely a scorned woman looking for revenge on an ex-lover because of the history that Richard and Janice had. However, However, with further investigation, they actually started to believe Janet's theory. Law enforcement couldn't prove Janet's theory about Richard because they didn't have any solid evidence that he actually injected her. And blood that's contaminated with HIV is pretty challenging to find, so where would he even get this blood, But investigators did a little digging, and they found that Dr. Richard's office kept meticulous records of all of their patients who had their blood drawn. According to forensic scientists, the virus is only potent outside of the body for about 2 hours. So this gives a very small window for Richard to have had to inject her with the virus. Richards would have had to have access to get the blood and then inject it into Janice's body. I don't know what I was thinking when I said, okay, I'm gonna do this. Look. Officers searched Dr. Schmidt's office, but they found no records from 1994. That's kind of strange, seeing as how his office was meticulous about keeping records. To have an entire year's worth of records missing is, I would say, rather bizarre. However, they did find the nude photos that he had threatened Janice with. On their way out of the office, investigators discovered a box labeled 1994. Could this be the records that were missing from 1994? Who knew? They were about to find out though. The box contained half a book of records. The last date written was August 4th, which we know is the day that he had gone over to Janice's house, pretty much forced the shot on her. It's not looking good, Dr. Schmidt. It's not. Is that straight? Probably not. Listen, I'm not the greatest with eyeliner. Let's move on. Okay, but isn't this so cute? I love it. A tracking number was written next to every patient who had blood drawn that day except for one, a Don McClelland. Instead of a tracking number, investigators noticed that there was a note written by Don's name. The note read, "For Dr. S." Do we like that? Maybe. There was only one thing left for police to do. So investigators went to the home of Don McClelland, and they wanted to find out if he was HIV positive. So of course, they didn't want to be, insensitive, but they had to get the information, and he told them that he did in fact have the virus. Starting to add up. Don informed authorities that in fact his HIV had already progressed into AIDS, and that he had been diagnosed for quite some time. He said that his doctor, Richard, had called him up on August 4th and asked him to come into the office for blood work. Wow. This man, he has no shame, really. So investigators wondered that if the virus that Janice had been infected with was taken from Don McClelland. I mean, duh, obvious. I wish they had a nude in this palette to blend with. I'm just using another nude because there's not a nude in this palette. Lafayette authorities turned to a genetic researcher at Baylor College of Medicine in Texas. At that time, Baylor College was the leading school for genome study. The researcher explained to the authorities that virus DNA testing is very different from regular DNA testing on a human. Mutating viruses make finding a match much harder. The researcher looked at 30 different blood samples from patients diagnosed with HIV that were in that hospital. Janice and McClelland's blood was amongst the samples that were tested. During the test, the researcher noticed that 28 of the 30 samples looked different. 2 of the blood samples were remarkably similar. And guess what? They were the 2 samples that belonged to Janice and Don McClelland. Why am I not surprised? Further testing, the researcher / forensic scientist, he was basically a forensic scientist, so I'm just gonna say forensic scientist, came to the conclusion that the chances that Don McClelland's HIV was not the source of Janice's were 1 in a million. With this new evidence, investigators finally had what they needed to go and make their arrest. And in 1996, Dr. Richard Schmidt was arrested and charged with attempted murder. But there was just one thing that investigators needed to figure out before the trial. You see, Janice didn't just have HIV, she also tested positive for hepatitis C. It appeared as though Janice was diagnosed with HIV and hepatitis C at the same time. However, Don McClelland didn't have hepatitis C. So if the blood came from Don, you would think that he would have hepatitis C as well. So where did Janice get the hepatitis C from? Investigators needed to do a little bit more digging, so they took a second look at the blood tracking sheets from 1994, and they found that another patient was listed without a tracking number. Remember, Don had originally been listed without a tracking number as well, so this was a huge red flag to them. The tracking sheets showed that Richard had taken this patient's blood just 2 days prior to August 4th when he took Don's blood. You about to get him. Like, homeboy was just over here taking people's blood and injecting other people, Janice pretty much, with other people's blood. Like, what in the y'all people are crazy out there, guys. Seriously, be careful, you guys, who you are messing with. You know what I mean? Messing with. Be careful, because you just never know. It's not the first time I think I've done a case on this channel where a doctor injected someone with someone else's blood. Something like that. What was that case? I don't know. I'll link it here on the screen. No. The case was that the doctor injected himself with a patient's blood so that when the police drew his blood, they wouldn't be able to match his DNA to the victim that he had. I believe that was it. I'll leave a link to that video up here, because that was like one of my first stories on this channel. When Richard was taken into interrogation, he told police that he had been home on the evening of August 4th, so there was no possible way that he could have done what Janice was saying that he did. And it's funny because I read somewhere, some article, that his wife also kind of corroborated his story initially, because she said she saw him home for some period of time that evening. She said that he was only away from her for about 20 minutes while she went to take a shower, and that was the only time that he was like out of her sight. I mean, this man was serious, dude. He literally did all of this in 20 minutes. Like, wow. Was it possible that he was able to get this blood and then make it from his place over to Janet's place, inject her, and make it back home in enough time before his wife got out of the shower? So it just so happened that Janice only lived about 17 minutes away from the Schmidts. So he very well could have done all that and made it back in time for his wife to see him and think that he had been home the entire time. I'm sure she probably wasn't just in the shower for 20 minutes. You know how we think we're taking a shower for 20 minutes, but we be up in there for 45. I don't know about y'all, but that's how I'd be up in there for like an hour and a half, thinking that I had been in there for 15 minutes. So I'm sure that she was probably in the shower a little bit longer than she thought. But that would explain, wow, I didn't realize the blush was that dark. That would explain why he was kind of acting nervous, outside of the fact that he was injecting her with HIV, but that would explain why he was in such a hurry when he went to see Janice, and he was acting nervous, and that he left so quickly because he was trying to get back before his wife got out of the shower. So, I mean, he was on it, okay? Authorities was trying to figure out why Richard would keep the medical records instead of just throwing them away. And they came to the conclusion, or they theorized rather, that Richard kept his medical records to keep them as some sort of trophy for what he had done. I mean, sicko. I don't know. What is the world coming to these days? During the trial, Janice gave a very chilling testimony. She said that Richard had only kept one promise to her, and that was to kill her. But he didn't even keep that because it didn't happen. So there we go. That's what I was looking for. A little Whoville action. Prosecutors argued that Richard kept his promise by using blood contaminated with HIV that he took from one of his patients. He injected the tainted blood into Janice's arm the same day that he took it from his patients to ensure that it maintained its potency. Dr. Schmidt may have been intelligent, but he didn't realize that the two HIV samples could be matched. Sounds like somebody needs to go back to school. Thanks to forensic science and some good police work, on October 23rd, 1998, Dr. Richard Schmidt was charged with attempted murder and was sentenced to 50 years hard labor. Okay, I guess. What did you guys think about this case and my makeup look? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you like videos like these, you can check out my last episodes. I will leave them linked on the screen right here or right here. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Please share because it really does help me out. And I'll see you guys next time with another true crime story time. Hopefully it's not gonna be a month. Okay, bye.